Good morning, namaste, salam, sat sri akal. मैं Gyanam Mahajan at UCLA, and we are recording a series on Hindi-Urdu grammar. In this first segment, I will talk about Hindi-Urdu relationship to English and why we want to teach or learn grammar of Hindi-Urdu this way. So what is the basis for my videos? And then I will move on to canonical word order in Hindi-Urdu. So let's get started. The first thing is, talking about this language once the pen works, right? So this language that I call Hindi-Urdu is not Hindi and it's not Urdu. This is the common spoken variety of Hindi and Urdu, and this is the language that is commonly spoken both in India and in Pakistan, let's say, and by several speakers around the globe. So I sometimes refer to this language as Hinurglish, meaning that we don't translate everything into like pure Hindi or pure Urdu, and we stay with common spoken language, which often uses words from English, and we can look at it as code mixing and code switching both. Although I'll try not to switch between the languages when I'm giving examples, but I will be doing a comparative between English and Hindi-Urdu. As far as words are concerned, as I mentioned, we will be using code mixing and what's referred to as translanguaging. Okay, so when we're talking about Hindi-Urdu, this language has a common source that it is derived from, and for our purposes, these are Indic languages, Indo-Aryan languages, and these are directly descended from Sanskrit, which itself is linked to Indo-Iranian languages. For example, Farsi or Dari, etc. And both of these are part of the Indo-European language family, and they are linked to Germanic languages, which contains not just German, but Dutch and English. So this is just to show you that Hindi-Urdu is linked to English. That is a primary reason for doing a comparative grammar when we are introducing Hindi-Urdu grammar. Here is a good reason to talk about English whenever possible. The second reason, of course, is that our students are, almost all of them are native speakers of English, and therefore it makes far more sense to them if we introduce Hindi-Urdu grammar through comparing it with English. And finally, I should mention the 5 C's, the World Readiness Standards, right? And one of the important C's, well, all C's are important. One of the C's is comparison C, right? And here we will be talking a bit more about that comparison C as we talk about Hindi-Urdu grammar. Okay, so now that we're done with this introduction and we want to start off by introducing the standard or canonical word order in Hindi-Urdu. And in order to do that, of course, let's start off with English. So let's start with something very, very simple. For example, John eats an apple every day. Right? If we say this sentence in Hindi-Urdu, it'll become John every day apple eats. So immediately we see that the word order to do with subject, object, and verb is different in English, which is called an SVO language. That means subject, verb, object language, versus Hindi-Urdu, where we get subject, object, and then the verb. So languages like Hindi-Urdu or Japanese are SOV languages. So that's one of the first things we realize when we talk about word order in Hindi-Urdu. It is an SOV language. Okay. Let's add a prepositional phrase to this sentence or a different sentence. So let's take Mary put the apple on the table. In Hindi-Urdu, this sentence will become Mary, so this one is Hindi-Urdu. Mary table on apple put. So the first thing we notice here is, again, repeating the fact that we have the subject and the object and the verb is at the end. But we also notice that in English we get on the table. So this locational preposition, which marks location, precedes the noun, which is table, right? So you get on the table, and this is why we call it preposition, right? Pre-noun, right? So it's a preposition, right? Whereas in Hindi-Urdu, we will say table on. And since the on, the preposition which marks location, follows the noun table. This is called a postposition. So, English has prepositional phrases, whereas Hindi-Urdu has postpositional phrases. Okay? So, it's a postposition that marks the location. It follows the noun. Okay? Let's try and make the sentence a bit longer. Okay? Let's add some phrases to this. By the way, what is a phrase? Phrase is just, more than one word. Let's put it that way. The easiest way of thinking about a phrase is that it is more than one word. And if we call something a prepositional or postpositional phrase, the most important element in that phrase is the preposition or postposition. And if we talk about a noun phrase, then the most important element in that noun phrase is the noun. So you can't have a noun phrase without a noun. You can't have a prepositional phrase or a postpositional phrase without the preposition or the postposition in that phrase. Okay? So let's take a slightly more evolved sentence. So let's take something like Mary gives a do you want an apple still? Okay. Mary gives an apple to John every day. Let me change the pen. So Mary gives an apple to John every day. Okay. What would happen in Hindi-Urdu? In Hindi-Urdu, we will get Mary, okay, and we tend to put the adverb in the second spot. Mary, every day. Then we put in to John, an apple, gives. Few quick things. The reason why I write the S after a gap is that's what the Hindi-Urdu verb does, and we'll talk about that in a second. Hindi-Urdu has a separate word or a distinctly different marker for tense. Okay? So let me give you the Hindi-Urdu sentence, which would be Mary, Rose, okay, John को. Now, I really don't need the an, so the word for apple is seb. The verb to give is de. We get deti because it's agreeing with Mary. And then we get the present tense marker, which is hai. So Mary, Rose is every day. John and ko means to, marks a recipient. To marks a recipient. Similarly, ko marks a recipient. Seb is an apple. And if you wanted to clarify an apple, you could put in the word for one. Okay? So, but please note, ek means one. It does not mean an. Okay? An means one in this example, but in general, an should be taken as being different from the number ek or one. Okay? What is this ti? Okay? So de is the verb give. Ti is what we call an aspectual marker, in this case, a habitual marker. What do we mean by that? It's an imperfect verb. The act has not been completed. The act denoted by the verb de happens more than once. It is like a habit, deti hai. Certainly happens more than once. Could happen many more times or is a repeated event, but certainly happens more than once. So we use the habitual marker, and we follow it up that this is, the event is happening in the now, in the present tense. So we put a present tense marker here. We'll come to these markers or variants, and what are the markers for habitual or for the, what are the tense markers. We'll come to it in a second. Let's stay on word order. So in English, we have our subject, we have our verb, we have the object, we have the recipient. Recipients are usually called, let's call it an indirect object. Okay, direct object, this is a direct object. Direct object is the object undergoing transfer. It's the thing that is being given or received, right? It's the object undergoing transfer. Indirect object is the recipient or goal. So here John is the indirect object, John is the recipient, John is the goal of the direct object apple. Okay. And then we have the adverb here. Okay. In the Hindi-Urdu sentence, we have the subject followed by the adverb. We like the adverb to be in the second spot, followed by the indirect object, then followed by the direct object, and then followed by the verb where you get the meaning part, and you attach the habitual aspect marker to this verb root or stem. And then there is a word boundary, and then you have the tense marker as a separate word. Okay, so this is the tense marker, and you end the sentence with that. So here is the canonical word order, well, here for English and here for Hindi-Urdu. Now, notice that in English, you could say the sentence starting with the adverb. You could say, every day, Mary gives an apple to John. Or you could say, Mary, every day, gives an apple to John. So you could potentially move every day to the beginning of the sentence, let's say. Okay. In Hindi-Urdu, actually, things are even more fluid than they are in English. So you could move things around. Okay. And for example, you could start off with Rose. Rose, Mary John को एक सेब देती है. Okay. You could say, Mary John को Rose एक सेब देती है. You could say, Mary John को सेब Rose देती है. So you could move it around. However, one thing that is true about English is also true about Hindi-Urdu. You cannot put it in between a phrase, right? So you wouldn't say, Mary gives an everyday apple to John, or to everyday John, right? You can't move it between within a phrase, right? So similarly in Hindi-Urdu, I just gave you examples that you could move every day to many different positions. However, you cannot make it go in between a phrase. So, for example, here, you can't say Mary John Rose ko सेब देती है. Doesn't sound good. Ungrammatical. Okay? So, as long as you don't put it within a particular phrase, you can move things around. In fact, you can move the subject too. You can say, Rose John ko Mary ek सेब देती है. But we must be careful that yes, you can move it around. However, the meaning changes slightly, or there is a different emphasis involved. It might change the topicalization within the sentence. So this order that I have given with the subject, adverb, indirect object, direct object, and verb is the canonical or unmarked word order. So can you move it? Yes, but then the meaning might change or the emphasis might change. Okay. One other thing, if we want to introduce negation in the sentence, then in English you'll say Mary does not give an apple to John every day. And in Hindi-Urdu, the negation will go before the verb. So Mary Rose John ko सेब, and this is where we'll put in the negation nahi. Mary Rose John को सेब नहीं देती है. Okay. One last bit about this segment is that if we have, instead of Mary and John, if we put in a noun, for example, let's do, let's say the boy, and here we'll do ladka, and we notice that in English we have this determiner or article, the. In Hindi-Urdu we don't have a corresponding article or determiner, and just ladka rose, and of course I put it in the wrong place. So we simply have ladka rose John ko सेब, but this time I have to change the agreement from feminine for Mary to masculine a for ladka. लड़का रोज जॉन को सेब देता है या नहीं देता है, it doesn't matter. Okay. In Hindi-Urdu, there are other clues to grammaticality than simply, when we are looking at the written form and looking at the endings. In addition, what does it sound like? So sounds carry grammar in Hindi-Urdu. What do I mean by that? लड़का रोज जॉन को सेब देता है. Things that are agreeing, the sound is matching up. Okay? We'll come to that later. But I want to point out that if there was an adjective here, then in English we'll say, let's say the tall boy, and in Hindi-Urdu also it'll precede the boy, and we'll get the word for tall is lamba, and once again the sound will match up, and you'll get lamba ladka rose John ko सेब देता है. Okay? So the adjective matches in sound to the noun that follows it, and it's matching to the right. It's the adjective that's changing its shape to match the shape of the noun. Okay, so the adjective precedes the noun, similar to English. Okay, and the last point that I wanted to mention is that if we had a question word, then, for example, we don't know what the tall boy gives to John, then in English, we'll remove apple and we'll put in the word what. However, in English, the question word is moved to the beginning of the sentence. So the English question will become, what does the tall boy give to John every day? Okay? In Hindi-Urdu, we remove the word for apple, and the word for what is kya. But Hindi-Urdu is easier. You don't need to move it. So we can say, लंबा लड़का रोज जॉन को क्या देता है? What does he give to John every day? Okay, so in Hindi-Urdu, the question word goes similar to the negation. It goes before the verb. So the unmarked place for the question word, for example, kya, is right before the verb. Okay? And if we began the sentence with kya, that's a yes-no question, not a real question word like what. Okay? We'll talk about that later. All right. So winding up in this segment, all we did was look at the relationship between Hindi-Urdu and English, that these are sister languages or cousins. And we looked at the canonical word order in Hindi-Urdu, and we noted the fact that Hindi-Urdu, the verb comes last. It is an SOV, subject-object-verb language, and we noted that it's a postpositional language, and the postposition follows the noun. And in a noun phrase, we noted that the noun follows the adjective. Okay? So in the next segment, we will talk a little bit more about the verb and other agreement features, so other phrases like the adjectival phrase, the postpositional phrase, etc.